Hello there. I just read this really important article called Making Philosophy Matter or Else. And it's basically about sort of the problem of the irrelevance of philosophy today outside of academia, really. And it talks about, I think it's, what is it, University of Nevada at Las Vegas, who are considering, because of budget concerns, they're considering just slashing the entire philosophy department. Um, and I think they reached a compromise where they still have the department, but they let go all of the junior positions basically. Now that's kind of messed up, but it sort of like signals maybe the start of a trend. So this article was concerned about that, particularly because academia, it seems like, is the perfect place for philosophy. If anything, like that's where it would be most protected. But even that that can't be guaranteed really. Um, so yeah, so I sort of wrote down some of my thoughts about this. I linked to this article, so you probably want to read the article first. It mentions some of these points, but most of what I wrote about, I posted on Reddit. My reply, I'm just going to read it because I think I write better than I talk. So, and I can get more said in a shorter amount of time. So I won't waste your time rambling on and things like that. So I'm just going to read straight up what I wrote, and you can respond to it. Um, so I just basically said, this is definitely depressing, but it seems to ring true. It's especially depressing for me since I've been thinking of changing careers from a pretty high-paying field into eventually teaching philosophy, which I feel would be a better contribution to the world. And yes, I know it wouldn't pay well and would be hard to find tenure or job in general, etc., etc. In any case, there's probably several factors at play here, some of which are covered in the article. One, cultural attitudes and trends in anti-intellectualism and otherwise. There might be a less demand for good, honest reasoning in the world today because image is more sellable and in demand. People would rather listen to a well-dressed and well-spoken person rather than a better reasoned person with a not so sharp of an image and not so clear of speech. Number two, changes in philosophy itself. As described in the article, shift away from improving oneself and more towards a more academic view, such as analysis of language, focused on hard philosophical problems, which are interesting but not practical. This has been going on for quite a while now. The continental analytic split doesn't help this very much, and the East-West split is harder still. But I believe there might be some real import to studying more mysterious, but perhaps more practical teachings of Eastern philosophies. Number three, the view of college solely as a way to secure employment. This is one of the things that makes people smirk when you say you majored in philosophy. I majored in philosophy, by the way. Because you couldn't go out and turn your degree into gold. In this view, even a used car salesman is less of a loser than a philosophy major. Not all folks hold this view because they might know that you can go on to study law, which is good business sense. In this sense, the philosophy degree wasn't wasted. This is probably just more of a problem with the world today. Anything that can't be marketed or bought may as well be useless. We're even finding, of course, that science and politics and even religion can be bought. This is what has turned American evangelicalism into something where inexplicably God wants you to get rich and donate more money to your mega churches, despite it being easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. Money corrupts everything, but it seems that philosophy is hard to corrupt. Therefore, there's fewer people willing to stick their necks out for philosophy. No corporations or politicians can really benefit from philosophy. Philosophy is depressing. Philosophy is extremely interesting, but with no ultimate answers. A whirlwind tour of philosophy into the present day leaves you exhausted and depressed. We're taught that as budding philosophers, we may finally have taken our first steps out of the cave. That's Plato's cave. Yet graduation looms, and we have to find a real job. So we have to force ourselves mentally back into the cave, playing all the games with the shadows just to get by in the world. It was extremely dissatisfying. Um, Personally, I've been affected with this mentality for a very long time, and oftentimes I think I would have been better off not studying philosophy at all. Uh, at least I would have known that then how to enjoy the game of life with everyone else and not be so neurotic about it, constantly thinking of it as a game of shadows. Another point, lack of spokesmen, or spokeswomen probably too. We need a Carl Sagan or a Neil deGrasse Tyson for philosophy. People have always been more interested in personalities rather than pure ideas, for better or worse. But personalities are okay as long as they're just there as a pointer, as role models for their field. I suppose the closest to this we have is Noam Chomsky, but perhaps we need something closer to Richard Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens type figure. Another point: philosophy is dangerous, at least to those in power. There's because there's nothing off limits to philosophy. It seeks out truth among all the BS of the world and may end up biting the hands that feed it. Anything that makes people question established order is a threat to established order. Much of philosophy is inaccessible. That's another point. There's a fair amount of material out there that because of age or because of an abuse of technical language, it's very inaccessible. This is good in a way because it encourages discussion, but it does not make things. But it does make things very vague. Academic philosophy has tried to remedy this by promoting clear and concise language, but there's still a fair amount of obscure stuff out there. Some of the confusing language seen on even the philosophy Reddit. Um, um, I butchered that. So basically, I was just pointing out that some of that obscure language is on Reddit too, where I was making this comment. But I think we're better off writing like we speak, unless, of course, you speak very confusingly. Um, Ultimately, I don't think it's philosophy alone that has doomed philosophy. It's also the attitudes of the world itself. It's true that philosophy, in the sense it's being done today, is almost useless to the world outside of academia. It does improve one's reasoning, and it might improve a person's general character, but that's not really tangible because it's not a marketable skill. You can go on and on about duck rabbits and gavagai, but in the end, the world outside academia views you as infinitely more useful if you are instead competent in JavaScript, something fleeting but more practical that can at least pay the bills. In a sense, it's good. It's harder for money to corrupt philosophy, but in the same stroke, that's what dooms it. I would hate to see philosophy change in such a way that all the offensive pieces were taken out and just the purely practical, purely marketable aspects remain. But in some sense, this is what's already happening with critical thinking classes in high school. It's philosophy stripped of all the angels dancing on pinheads and marketed as something more practical, which comes out as being something to help you better argue and reason your trite 5-paragraph assignment. Sure, we can change philosophy and make it into something more practical, but it seems in order for it to truly be successful, the world's attitudes need to change. And only then can we meet somewhere in between. So what are your thoughts? If you can leave them in the short space that YouTube provides you. Or I'll also link off to the Reddit thread, which affords you a little more space to write out something. But I think it's something that's important, and philosophy has always sort of been near to my heart since I had the first class in high school. It sort of turned me on to it. So I think it's an important thing to discuss. But there you have it. There's my thoughts on the matter. So what do you think?